press forward. And I mean, this particular topic is about Mother's Heart for Africa. And it's a little bit of a report, a little bit of just like an insight of what is exciting and what's happening there, and Mother's heart behind investing into Africa. And a recent speech she gave at a, they were making reports about a recent trip they made to Africa, and then she gave some comments on it. And this time I wanted to start with a little video clip which shows both an excerpt from Mother's actual speech that we'll read together and you can hear her own voice, but also it has a few words from Dr. Yoon reporting about the trip. You may have seen it, it's a clip from Peace TV, but I felt like this was good to have as a foundation before we read Mother's speech, and then I'll also interject some other things that I have learned through some of our reports. So here is the video, and we'll just watch a few minutes of this. Let me know if the sound is okay when we go.
The victorious return from the African tour was then celebrated with the cutting of a cake. True Mother commented the outcome of the tour and called for continued prayer for what has been achieved to bear great fruits.
씨를 뿌렸어. 씨를 뿌렸으면 돌보아야 해, 케어해줘야 해. 그래서 그들이 모두 하늘이 자랑할 수 있는 알곡, 천보의 승리한 아들, 딸이 될 수 있도록 천일국의 백성의 자격을 가질 수 있도록 종단과 나라를 축복하는 길이야. 그래서 이번 윤영호 본부장이 다녀오는 길은 그걸 재확인하고 튼튼한 반석 위에 천일국을 세우는 중요한 책임적 책무를 다 하고 왔어. 이제 내년이면은 천원궁 천일성전을 하늘 앞에 봉헌하게 돼. 하늘 부모님의 꿈을 지상에서 이룰 수 있는 환경권을 더 넓혀야 되잖아. 더 넓히는 데 있어서 아프리카가 앞장서고 있어. 여러분들이 이제 이 민족 앞에, 이 나라 앞에, 세계 앞에 보여주는 지도자가 돼야 돼. 말로만 선포로서가 아닌 실적. 하늘 앞에 거두어드리는 여러분이 되어야만 해. 하늘이 아프리카 대륙에 긍휼히 여기셔서 놀라운 섭리를 일으켜 주셨듯이 여러분들의 정성과 노력이 이제는 하늘을 감동시켜야 되잖아? 그래 안 그래? 대답뿐이 아닌 행동으로서 보여줘야 돼.
This special African tour, which started with 3 objectives: summit-level meetings, meetings with top religious-level leaders, and the Regional General Assembly of African Leaders, revealing the substantial cause of God's providence that and how He wants it to unfold throughout the heavenly shining Africa.
어머니께서 떠나는 날, 제가 아침 조회를 복을 드리니까 그냥 목걸이를 주셨습니다. 그린 색깔이었는데 내가 너와 함께 갈 거다. 그러니까 염려 말고 가서 잘 사랑을 주고 좋은 실적을 가지고 와라.
As such, like that, throughout the tour, he could feel empowered by the knowledge that True Mother was with him. Director Yoon Young-ho continued his report after emphasizing that it is not all about adopting a resolution but achieving concrete fruits.
그래서 이번에 아프리카를 간 것은 이 아프리카를 중심으로 유엔이 지금 할 수 없는 세계의 질서를 재편해야 된다고 저는 믿습니다. 그것이 신통일 세계라고 확신합니다. 그 중심에 부모님, 참어머님이 계셔야 한다 저는 믿습니다. 그걸 만들어야죠. 퀀텀 점프를 해야죠. 국가 단위가 아니고 대륙 단위로 가야 됩니다.
Director Yoon Young-ho explained the purpose of the African tour as follows.
이 신아프리카를 놓고는 네 가지의 목적을 제가 한번 정리해봤습니다. 첫 번째, 신통일 세계 안착 기반 조성을 위한 60개월 노정의 출발이다. 두 번째는 이 신통일 세계에는 실체적 대륙 복귀 3분의 1을 복귀하고자 하는 신통일 세계 안착 기반 조성. 그러니까 신통일 한국은 안착을 해야 하고요. 신통일 세계는 안착 기반을 조성해야 됩니다. 세 번째는 아프리카를 모델로 만드시려고 합니다. 저는 그걸 신통일 세계 운전자론이라고 부릅니다. 그리고 네 번째는 하늘 부모님 성회의 예배 플랫폼과 그리고 어머님이 만드신 UN 플랫폼을 아프리카 유니언에 세팅하는 겁니다.
All right. So a lot of stuff there. And I always love hearing Mother speak, you know, her own voice. You can kind of get a sense of her energy behind the way she's speaking. And I personally think she looks extra beautiful in that particular outfit. Just the white makes her look very regal. But yeah, we can go ahead and read through this speech and I'll add a little bit. So we did see some of it again and I'll read through it one more time. Okay, so on this day, we are grateful to our Heavenly Parent and our hearts are filled with joy. In the course of heaven's sorrowful providence to save fallen humanity, God finally established the true parents who conducted the providence for 60 years together. On that foundation, through True Mother, the only begotten daughter, Foundation Day was proclaimed and the new era of Chenoguk was opened. And I just want to highlight, she's constantly making this reference about 60 years, 60 years. And in this particular statement, it says, true parents conducted the providence for 60 years together. They did that portion together. And she's kind of differentiating the second course, right? After Father passed, now True Mother brought Foundation Day, and now the new era of Chenoguk has been opened. So she's just clearly differentiating between those two stages. The true parents must show what Chenoguk looks like. It is the Creator's dream to save and embrace all fallen humanity through the true parents. God wants to embrace all people as his children. Nevertheless, looking at the history of the providence of salvation, its development has been a result of heaven's arduous work. The point is that Heavenly Parents' dream is realized while true parents are on earth. Considering such a providence under heaven, how serious I have been, you cannot imagine. And that was the tone that I was picking up when she was speaking, right? It felt actually quite stern to me, quite serious, quite almost, not quite frustrated, but really making sure that the leadership in the room understood that this was very pivotal, the situation, the time that we're living in, the providence. She was really having a stern energy, tough mom love. And, when I read this, it's talking about how it makes the point that Heavenly Parents' dream is realized while true parents are on earth. And I think we've talked about a few times, Mother's probably recognizing she only has a certain amount of time left in her life. And she has to think about that and prepare for that. But on the flip side, she's also feeling the urgency. There's not a lot of time left. And how much will the providence and heaven's blessings shift after Mother goes to spirit world? How much more difficult will it become? I mean, think about what happened after Jesus passed away and what the transition was for Christianity, and honestly how Christianity got kind of lost, over time through people trying to make sense of it and create rules and regulations and systems. And so the more that can happen while Mother is on earth, the clearer it will be. And I also suspect the greater blessing will come from heaven because Mother is on earth. the greater victory will come because mother's on earth. And if mother passes away before certain things have happened, what does that mean for us? What does that mean for the providence? And so it's a pretty serious time that we're in. I mean, she says, how serious I have been, you cannot imagine. And I think that's really spot on. We cannot imagine how serious it is for mother right now. So knowing heaven's wish, although Christian culture has spread across the globe from the places where it developed, such as Europe and Asia, the continent that God most desires to embrace and love is Africa, where there is poverty and where people face difficulties in life. And I've been engaging in mother, like really trying to study mother's heart behind Africa, because there's a lot happening in the providence right now with Africa. And when you read the sections in the memoir, you know, mother really, really as like a mom cares about the people of Africa, and particularly, you know, what are the European ancestors did to Africans by, you know, in God's name and in the name of Christianity, abusing people and creating slavery. And, you know, mother really has this incredible heart, a desperate heart to really heal that area, the people who have suffered that course. And, you know, how Africa's, you know, success has been diminished because of, you know, being colonized and people taking over and misusing and everything like that. And so she's recognizing that, right? And she's saying, I mean, it's very interesting that God most desires to embrace and love Africa. Why is that? And what does that mean? And like, what could that mean in the next decade if that is true? And a lot of the providential energy is being shifted to Africa. What does that mean? What could happen there? It's very interesting to think about. The Unification Church Providence is also very weak in Africa. However, I wish to show something to the world through Africa. When I said I would go to Senegal in Africa and hold a summit, the executives were not in agreement with me due to the very poor foundation we have there. These countries were not Christian, but Muslim. I therefore saw more possibilities. So I don't know the whole story here, but there seems to be some kind of summit that was going to happen in Senegal, and things shifted. I know that I think it was in July that there was a plan to hold some kind of big gathering there, particularly with religious leaders, from what I understood. And now that energy is being shifted to invite these African leaders to the International Leadership Conference that's happening in Korea in August. And, you know, even part of that, I had to write this down so I remember this information correctly, but the President Bazoum, who's the president of Niger, really wanted to involve this group called the Sensad Group, which is a group of nations in the Saharan and Sahel area of Africa. And what they agreed with Dr. Yoon when he made the visit is that they would bring, so the governments have what they call youth ministers. These are not like Christian ministers. These are ministers of government in charge of youth education and youth activity. And the government made a plan with Dr. Yoon and with UPF and with True Mother to bring 29 representatives of these, from 29 nations, of these youth ministers from their government. So these are the people in the government who are in charge of youth activity and education. So these 29 people will be joining the International Leadership Conference. And these are like official leaders in these capacities from these nations in Africa. At the same time, they're going to bring maybe 40 to 60 religious leaders to join from Africa for the International Leadership Conference. And so I think this is kind of salvaging whatever didn't happen in this original plan. And Mother's seeing, she says, I therefore saw more possibilities. And maybe that's why there can be a shift in this direction to support the ILC. But that's huge. I mean, it's huge to be working with the actual government leaders. And what we heard from the report is that Dr. Yoon and this president, the former president of Prime Minister of Niger, I'm sorry, my notes are incomplete, but had this very tearful conversation about this topic and about taking care of the youth. And so, it just really makes me proud of what we're doing. And it shows very substantially Mother is serious about supporting Africa at this time. And it's going to be exciting to see what develops from it. Sorry, that's a repeat. She said, however, I knew that there were righteous people, leaders whom heaven has raised up in this struggling continent and who could move Africa with their heart for God. Therefore, I pushed for the summit. I pushed, and the Africa Summit was successfully held, and we achieved a regional level triumph in Niger. These countries were not Christian, but Muslim. I therefore saw more, I'm sorry, these are mixed up notes here. Mixed up sentences. So as we saw, Dr. Ewan and some of the core leaders did go to Africa and hold these initial meetings, and were able to, make the plans for them to also come to the ILC in August. And so Mother's claiming that victory, even though it was very difficult, maybe didn't go exactly as planned, maybe things weren't perfect, but that a next level offering could be made. When the one who was first feels shame and repents through the one who is last, this opens the way for them to come to God. And I've tried to make sense of this. I think it's a reference to Mother. When she speaks about Africa, she often quotes the Bible about how the first shall be last and the last shall be first. And she references how, Africa has kind of walked this difficult course, but now is a time for them to be first. And so it's interesting to me to look at that and say, when the one who was first feels shame and repents through the one who was last, this opens the way for them to come to God. So it's kind of like, those of us who economically and developmentally as nations have been more successful than Africa, when we can recognize, what we've done to other countries, to other nations, especially to the continent of Africa, and repent for that, then it opens the way for them to come to God. She says, thus I connected 3 righteous people as brothers among Muslim and Christian religious leaders. As instructed from our headquarters, they are now educating their congregations about the responsibilities of Chunbo couples and putting them into practice. And perhaps you've seen some of these reports. I know Prophet Radebe is one of those, where he has been educating his entire congregation to go through Chunbo, that they've participated virtually through, when they were doing the online Chunbo workshops to liberate ancestors. And, that's a big deal. Like, as we discussed in our last reading of the speech, where Mother is talking about the importance of Chunbo, the importance of the spiritual providence that I think we're just tapping into, why it's so significant. There's some kind of huge spiritual shift that Mother is desperate to see. And she knows that if we can liberate enough of spirit world, that some real shifts and things can be shooken up here on earth. But the more people who can liberate the ancestors, right, the more heavenly spiritual protection and support we have. And so she's instructed particular religious leaders from this continent to have their congregations go through Chunbo. She's asking the same thing of the American Christians, the Christian clergy, and some of them are preparing to come join us in the next few weeks when we have the Chunbo programs in Las Vegas and New York. You may see some of our Christian pastors joining us, which is exactly what Mother wants to see. We have sown seeds. As we continue to plant seeds, we must also nurture them. We need to care for them. The way to progress is to bless religious orders and nations, that there may be fruits that God can be proud of. Sons and daughters who are victorious Chunbo and who are qualified to be citizens of Chanoguk. Through this visit, Director General Yoon Young-ho reaffirmed this path and has fulfilled an important responsibility in building Chanoguk on solid rock. So this was part of what we saw when she was speaking, and we definitely picked up on the seriousness of what she's talking about. And lately she's saying, we have to stop just talking about it, you guys. We have to actually do something about it. We have to actually bring results. And that's the same message I get here, that we need to nurture them. We need to care for it. We need to, really raise sons and daughters who are qualified to be citizens of Chanoguk. And I don't know, this word reaffirmed and kind of the the paragraph earlier where there was some, you know, sort of disunity and things didn't go exactly as planned. You know, I feel like that, I don't know the whole story, right? I'm kind of inferring that, but I feel like it's important to recognize that there are difficulties along the way, and that it's not always easy, you know, even for a true mother and even for the top leadership in international headquarters, that they are dealing with really precarious situations, and they have to keep having faith in very hopeless situations and keep pushing forward. And I think we have some real gratitude to offer to those who are doing that and really bring those victories that do ultimately make True Mother happy, that it, you know, it's an incredible sacrifice and it's incredibly difficult and stressful. Next year, we will dedicate the Chunwongung Chunil Sanctum to God. This is the building we read the speech about, May 5th, 2023, that this is when we need to clear everything up by that date, everything needs to be cleared. To fulfill God's dream on earth, surely we must further expand the environment. Africa is leading the way in this regard. Let's now become leaders who can demonstrate this to the people, to this nation, and to the world. Results rather than words of proclamation. You must become reapers for God. In such a situation where it is impossible to predict the future, this government and this people must listen to the voice of God. So again, Mother is urgently reminding us that we have to bring actual results, not just talk about it, not just proclaim it, but bring results. And, you know, there's this whole energy around the African continent right now, which is just, I'm really intrigued and I'm excited. And, you know, when I'm in these UPF international meetings, it's just incredible, you know, how regularly they're meeting with the top levels of African nations and how easily they have access to them, and that these leaders want to work with UPF. They have the strong foundation. But she is urging people that they need to listen to the voice of God. It's impossible to predict the future. So this government and this people must listen to the voice of God. They must revere God, otherwise the future of this nation cannot be assured. How should you proceed if the situation is so desperate and urgent that there is no time to waste? In that, God has had compassion for the continent of Africa and developed an amazing providence. Now your devotion and effort should move heaven, shouldn't they? Is that right or not? It is right. You must show it not just with your answers, but with action. So again, it's like she's almost scolding our leaders, like, you are not, she's basically hinting that the level of devotion and sincerity and investment is maybe not quite up to par with what she's expecting. I also, you know, we've discussed in some of our discussions, the mother's desire for the spiritual revolution that kind of represents the earlier days of the church. And, you know, I don't know how many of you were on the tribe call last night where Reverend Chung, the new leader that Mother sent to be in charge of the Chungbo Training Center in America, he was sharing. And again, it's a lot of his education is about how to pray very deeply and sincerely, that like heaven shakes your body and you feel it, and it's a very like visceral experience, and you can communicate with spirit world, you can channel spirit world, you can really have substantial experience with spirit world. And I feel like I'm noticing this theme a lot, that Mother is sensing that this is a real weakness in our movement, the spiritual side, our spiritual practice, that sometimes we're good at getting people to show up to speak and record a message, but there's some kind of spiritual and artistic transformation that's missing from a lot of what we're doing. So that is where that speech ends. And yeah, my takeaway from this is I'm excited to see what happens with Africa. You know, when I listen to the testimonies and the stories from those who are working there, they're just fresh and incredible and exciting and so hopeful. It's really different from what we're doing in America. It's, I don't know how to explain it. It feels like energy. That's what it feels like when you hear those testimonies and reports. And so Mother's Right On, that heaven is investing special energy, special grace, special development in Africa. And, we're not so connected to it, honestly. And I think hopefully soon we can start hearing more about what's happening, but it's really becoming the model, the example of how restoration can happen substantially. In Dr. Yoon's report, he talked about substantially restoring 1/3 of the continent, of the nation, which is Mother's goal, right? She made this goal for 2027 that 1/3 of the world's population will know and attend Heavenly Parent. But he's really seeing, and they're experiencing and building the platform to be able to substantially bring that in Africa, working with the government ministers of youth. Imagine if the person who's in charge of all the youth education and all the youth activity embraces divine principle, embraces True Parents' teachings, and integrates that into the standard national education for young people. Just imagine what that means. That would be a total transformation. That's the way to change a society, is educating young people. If you study how, I recently watched a documentary about Cambodia and what had happened there with the Khmer Rouge, and how they took young children and basically, brainwashed them and educated them to believe in a certain, Americans were evil. They have been practicing killing American figures and things like that. Same thing happens in North Korea, right? They have the day where they hate America, or Hate America Month. So, that education from a young age shifts your whole thinking, shifts your whole culture, shifts your ability to interact with your original mind and your original heart. But what if it's the opposite, right? What if now the education for young people at the highest level is teaching about who God is as your Heavenly Parent, and cultivating a filial heart? What does that mean for those who go on to have families and their children receive the same education? That's really the way to change the world. So it's very significant to have these youth ministers coming and joining and working with us and exchanging resources. I know some of that has already happened in Sao Tome and Principe, which maybe some of us have heard about. So I'm just feeling really hopeful because of Africa, and I'm excited to see where it develops. So I will stop